Guess we'll get started here. Okay, we are on page 136, as we've already said. It's chapter 10, two employers. It also could also, this one's kind of special. It could also say two sponsors. What we're going to be reading here is some things that were written by Hank Parkhurst in the first part of this chapter. And he was a part of Standard Oil in New Jersey. He got sober at Towns Hospital. He stayed sober for about 4 years. And then the first edition, his story was on page 163, if anybody does have a first edition. But because of the fact that he only stayed sober for 4 years, he's not really remembered for much other than he's mentioned, but they don't give him the credit. I guess he's mentioned and actually talked about quite a bit. They just don't give him credit for what he had done for AA and for the Big Book. In fact, you can say that the Big Book wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for Hank Parkhurst. So I'm not going to do it justice with regard to the history of Hank Parkhurst, but I am going to say that he did a lot for AA. He was a good and very close friend of Bill's and part of the New York group. And it was his offices and, his secretary that helped write the Big Book. And we'll get started, I guess. Rob?
Okay, we're on page 136, everybody. And here we go, two employers. Among many employers nowadays, we think of one member who has spent much of his life in the world of big business. He has hired and fired hundreds of men. He knows the alcoholic as the employer sees him. His present views ought to prove exceptionally useful to businessmen everywhere, but let him tell you. I was at one time assistant manager of a corporation department, employing 6,600 men. One day my secretary came in saying that Mr. B insisted on speaking to me. I told her to say that I was not interested. I had warned him several times that he had but one more chance. Not long afterward, he had called me from Hartford on two successive days, so drunk he could barely speak. I told him he was through, finally and forever.
What we're going to be reading here, and this is kind of the start, is going to be the transition of a employer that is a bit reluctant / resistant to those that have a drinking problem. He is going to admit at first that he was uneducated, and we're going to see that in the ways of trying to work with an alcoholic. And that's kind of what this story is about, is kind of the what an employer can actually do for one of their employees that has a drinking problem. And we're going to see that kind of going through this. So Rob will read we'll read a couple of paragraphs at a time here, just to
okay. I just want to throw a couple of things in if I can, Leo. Now, as Leo said, Hank Parkhurst would have been known as a founder if he hadn't gone out drinking. If it wasn't for Hank Parkhurst, this book would not be written. He pushed Bill to write it. He pushed Bill to get chapters written so he could raise money in order to try to get this book published. Without Hank, there's no book. Without the book, there might not be any AA. So we owe Hank a debt of gratitude for all that he had done. Also, Hank was a deist who believed that we were created by a higher power, but that's it. He had no other interest. Okay, this chapter does not mention God or a higher power. Okay, so keep that in mind, because his writing is a little bit different. Now, the first part was written by Bill. Now, when it gets into I was one time assistant manager, that's where Hank takes over and starts writing. So let's go. My secretary returned to say that it was not Mr. B on the phone. It was Mr. B's brother, and he wished to give me a message. I still expected a plea for clemency, but these words came through the receiver. I just wanted to tell you, Paul jumped from a hotel window in Hartford last Saturday. He left us a note saying you were the best boss he ever had, and that you were not to blame in any way. Another time, as I opened a letter which lay on my desk, a newspaper clipping fell out. It was the obituary of one of the best salesmen I ever had. After 2 weeks of drinking, he had placed his toe on the trigger of a loaded shotgun. The barrel was in his mouth. I had just charged him for drinking 6 weeks before. Still another experience. A woman's voice came faintly over long distance from Virginia. She wanted to know if her husband's company insurance was still in force. 4 days before, he had hanged himself in his woodshed. I'd been obliged to discharge him for drinking, though he was brilliant, alert, and one of the best organizers I ever known.
So there's a couple of messages here. One is that we're hearing some of the unfortunate situations where people have taken it to the extreme and essentially either taken their life or lost their life in large part due to their alcoholism. And yes, these situations are extreme. You might think that this guy's got a stroke of bad luck, but remember, he's got 6,600 men that he had employed. So out of 6,600 people, having over a course of a period of time, having 3 people commit suicide or lose their life due to a one issue here, which is in this case drinking, is probably very likely. The second thing that I want to note is that you can obviously see his resistance to those that have been drinking, and he is not at all feeling like he should be reaching out to help them in any way, even though when you read about each of the people, they happen to be the best or near the best of what he's got in those particular categories of workmanship. And that is something that I think is important to kind of note here, that a lot of alcoholics are actually very successful people and or have got good qualities about them, and they are in fact hard workers and valued by their employees. I'm sorry, their employers. So it's not all somebody that can't get up in the morning, is in their parents' basement on a couch, and completely gone and can't do anything without a drink kind of thing. In some cases, they do function and they do quite well. They just happen to have this problem, which gets in the way, obviously, of their lives, regardless of what you might want to think that is. So anyway, just some examples here, just to kind of set the stage for how this employer develops. Right?
Yeah, Leo, I just want to go back to page 25 for a moment in there as a solution. And near the bottom, the last paragraph, it says, we were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but 2 alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. Unfortunately, these people did not get the spiritual help they needed. And that is the sad part.
Right.
That's why it's so important that we carry this message, that we can help the alcoholic who is still suffering. There were 3 exceptional men lost to the world because I did not understand alcoholism as I do now. What irony. I became an alcoholic myself. And but for the intervention of an understanding person, I might have followed in their footsteps. My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars, where it takes real money to train a man for an executive position. This kind of waste goes on unabated. We think the business fabric is shot through with a situation which might be helped by better understanding all around.
So we got a couple of new things that are coming up. We knew that there was going to be a transition, and certainly this is going to be the start of it. At the same time, we also find out that this employer was in fact an alcoholic himself. And so with the exception, with that, he had the exception, which was he had somebody that took care of him and helped him through it. And this is where he finally starts to learn and realize what it is to be an alcoholic. But I think it's another important thing here is that, when you look at business and you're thinking in terms of what it costs to go out, recruit, interview, hire, train, and support an employee, is it does take real money. I mean, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars to do those kind of things. So when you've got a good employee, you want to stick with them because it actually costs less to support them through a problem than it is to let them go and go out and find a new person to replace them. So there's some real truth to that, and they want to make that as part of this known, because if you are working with somebody that is trying to talk to an employer, this is something that could be used as an example to ask for help. Although in today's times, there is a lot of resources in most cases, not all, but in most cases, there are resources available to help the employee through some of their problems. Rob?
Yeah, it says here on page 137 that we've been reading, I became an alcoholic myself, and but for the intervention of an understanding person. Well, we know this person is Bill Wilson, who went and talked to Hank. They met at Towns Hospital, but the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution can gain confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Where doctors and psychiatrists, etc., they don't gain the trust. So remember that. Nearly every modern employer feels a moral responsibility for the well-being of his help, and he tries to meet these responsibilities. That he has not always done so for the alcoholic is easily understood. To him, the alcoholic has often seemed a fool of the first magnitude. Because of the employee's special ability or of his own strong personal attachment to him, the employer has sometimes kept such a man at work long beyond a reasonable period. Some employers have tried every known remedy. In only a few instances has there been a lack of patience and tolerance. And we who have imposed on the best of employers can scarcely blame them if they have been short with us.
Yeah, so this is also I guess the opposite side of the spectrum, and that is employers are keeping employees on long. It does cost money when people don't show up for work. So on the flip side of the coin, not only is it costing money to try to find somebody new and recruit, interview, hire, train, and support, it also costs money when you have people not showing up for work and not making a sale or not supporting a customer in some manner or fashion, and you lose customers for that very reason. And hanging on to somebody that's far beyond help in the traditional manner. And what I mean by that is that you've used every means possible to try and support the individual. And if it still doesn't work, then just like a sponsor with a sponsee, if you've got somebody that's just not ready to stop, for example, it's time to move on to the next person and try again, just like Bill did, so many times in the beginning with regard to his sponsoring of sponsors and alcoholics. Rob?
Okay. Here, for instance, is a typical example. An officer of one of the largest banking institutions in America knows I no longer drink. One day he told me about an executive of the same bank who, from his description, was undoubtedly alcoholic. This seemed to me like an opportunity to be helpful. So I spent 2 hours talking about alcoholism, the malady, and described the symptoms and results as well as I could. His comment was, "Very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. He has just returned from a 3 months leave of absence, has taken a cure, looks fine, and to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him this was his last chance."
So we've got somebody that's fresh-faced, that just been to 3 months of rehab, as we know it today. And certainly, those first few weeks after rehab is almost always successful. The person is, should be having a very good time with not drinking. However, the fact that they've got they've got ultimatums in front of them. I think we all know that ultimatums don't always motivate people, especially when they're powerless over alcohol. An ultimatum is just not going to work. So this told him it was his last chance, is not necessarily going to be effective with an alcoholic. So I think it's important to kind of note, as a sponsor or as a family member, ultimatums again, don't always do what you want them to do. In fact, they can have the opposite effect, and the alcoholic can get the heckets and say, I'll show you, and go out and drink anyway, just because of the fact that they've been given an ultimatum. But in this case, you've got somebody noted 3 months of rehab. They're back, they're fresh faced, certainly for a short period of time. At a minimum, they're not going to drink. And in some cases, it does, in fact, become effective and works, and they can stay sober for a long period of time, if not forever. But I think we're going to find out something different. It turns out that this particular person that they're talking about's name is Clarence Snyder, and he was a senior executive at this bank. So just as a note, Rob's put that in the chat for us. Rob?
Yeah, he started AA in Cleveland. Also, Hank Parkhurst married his daughter, I believe. Interesting, isn't it? Oh well. The only answer I could make was that if the man followed the usual pattern, he would go on a bigger bust than ever. I felt this was inevitable and wondered if the bank was doing the man an injustice. Why not bring him into contact with some of our alcohol crowd? He might have a chance. I pointed out that I had nothing to drink whatever for 3 years, and this in the face of difficulties that would have made 9 out of 10 men drink their heads off. Why not at least afford him an opportunity to hear my story? Oh no, said my friend. This chap is either through with liquor, or he is minus a job. If he has your willpower and guts, he will make the grade.
Yeah, and that's kind of short-sighted. It's ignorant to take that tact and take a look with regard to an employee, and basically saying, there isn't any aftercare, any support after the fact. And I'm talking in terms of going to rehab. Once they are out of rehab and they're fresh-faced and ready to go, they're anxious to support, have their sobriety supported, and readily acceptant of that help. Why not help them with things like AA and people like us, and that can work with them as far as that's concerned. So this again shows some short-sightedness and some ignorance with regard to how to handle a person after rehab. Rob?
I love how the fact that, they spend time talking to the employer about what alcoholism is. And it just goes right over their head because they don't understand. They think it's all a matter of willpower and guts. If he really wants to stop, he can do it. They don't realize the hold that alcohol has on us alcoholics. And this is the thing: patience, tolerance, understanding, and love. You have to be patient, because we're trying to get across our message. And getting it through to the alcoholic is difficult enough. Trying to get it through to the family members is even more difficult because they don't understand it. They don't have that disease. They don't understand that we have no power over taking that first drink. And once we take that drink, the allergy kicks in, the phenomenon of craving, and we can't control the amounts we drink. People don't understand that. So it takes time, patience, and understanding, and a lot of love. I wanted to throw up my hands in discouragement, for I saw that I had failed to help my banker friend understand. He simply could not believe that his brother executive suffered from a serious illness. There was nothing to do but wait. Presently, the man did slip and was fired. Following his discharge, we contacted him. Without much ado, he accepted the principles and procedures that had helped us. He is undoubtedly on the road to recovery. To me, this incident illustrates lack of understanding as to what really ails the alcoholic, and lack of knowledge as to what part employers might profitably take in salvaging their sick employees.
Yeah, so basically we're just reinforcing what we've already talked about and said, and that is one, without the support of a program such as AA, and especially AA, the problem is going to come back, and the alcoholic is going to drink again. In this case, they were given an ultimatum, which obviously didn't work. He lost his job and is now, once he was approached and contacted by some of our own, the founding members, especially in this case, was able to accept the principles and is living a sober life. So, and then the message, like I have, is said in the book here, the support and the of the employer for the employee is much less expensive than it is to fire and then go out and hire somebody new to take their place.
If you desire to help, it might be well to disregard your own drinking or lack of it. Whether you are a hard drinker, a moderate drinker, or a teetotaler, you may have some pretty strong opinions, perhaps prejudices. Those who drink moderately may be more annoyed with an alcoholic than a total abstainer would be. Drinking occasionally and understanding your own reactions, it is possible for you to become quite sure of many things which, so far as the alcoholic is concerned, are not always so. As a moderate drinker, you can take your liquor or leave it alone. Whether you want to, you control your drinking. Of an evening, you can go out on a mild bender, get up in the morning, shake your head, and go to business. To you, liquor is no real problem. You cannot see why it should be to anyone else, save the spineless and stupid.
Boy, wouldn't it be nice to be able to control your drinking, or at least, as we've said here, if you don't have a drinking problem, you're not even really controlling it either. It's just not a part of your problems in your life and everything. But not only that, but this is that closed-mindedness, that contempt before exploration, and the acceptance of the fact that there are people out there that can't control their drinking, and not having that acceptance is also showing some ignorance. And not only are they showing some ignorance, but there's also a prejudice that's being kind of expressed here with the last sentence there, save the spineless and stupid. Obviously, that shows a real prejudice against alcoholics and the problem drinker. Right.
Yeah, and you see here, people that aren't alcoholic, they don't understand. They really think it's a choice that alcoholics make, that they want to drink, that they drink to excess because they're weak. They don't know when to stop. They don't realize that it's an illness. We have been taught that it's an illness. Okay, we know what the symptoms are, and we know what we need to do in order to stop. Most people don't. They think it's just willpower. So please, that's why it's important that we carry this message to alcoholics that are still suffering. When dealing with an alcoholic, there may be a natural annoyance that the man be so weak, stupid, and irresponsible. Even when you understand the malady better, you may feel this feeling rising. A look at the alcoholic in your organization is many times illuminating. Is he not usually brilliant, fast-thinking, imaginative, and likable? When sober, does he not work hard and have a knack for getting things done? If he had these qualities and did not drink, would he be worth retaining? Should he have the same consideration as other ailing employees? Is he worth salvaging? If your decision is yes, whether the reason be humanitarian or business or both, then the following suggestions may be helpful.
Yeah, these are good questions to ask as an employer. Also, even as a sponsor, asking these questions in regard to a sponsee, and or thinking kind of this transitioning over to a family member that's working with a son or daughter, a husband, a wife, a brother, sister, etc. These are good questions to ask with regard to whether or not it's worthwhile working with them or not. Yes, in most cases, I'm going to say that it is worth working with them, and you have to give it a really solid try. And whether it's humanitarian or business or both, and to try to work with somebody, there's good reason for it, and you ought to take at least that first step in reaching out and trying. And as an employer, especially as an employer, we're talking about the retaining of a good employee. Initially, they're good. They're showing, that they've got good qualities, and their value to the company is real. And they, just like any other ailing employee, for another problem or ailment, you would kick them to the curb immediately, like they have in the past year with regard to some of the other examples that we've seen. Rob?
Can you discard the feeling that you are dealing only with habit, with stubbornness, or a weak will? If this presents difficulty, rereading chapters 2 and 3, where the alcoholic sickness is discussed at length, may be worthwhile. You as a businessman want to know the necessities before considering the result. If you concede that your employee is ill, can he be forgiven for what he has done in the past? Can his past absurdities be forgotten? Can it be appreciated that he has been a victim of crooked thinking directly caused by the action of alcohol on his brain?
And this is kind of that learning curve. Those first couple of chapters we've talked about at nauseum with regard to why they're important, why they're valuable, and why they do in fact help people understand alcoholism. And when they understand alcoholism, they have a different outlook with regard to employees in this case. And it is one that shows that they can give them some good consideration and support. And this one of the things here is that, can past absurdities be forgotten? I don't necessarily think that they need to be forgotten, but maybe forgiven. And just like with anybody, it's hard to forget when things have gone awry. But I'm not saying that they should hold them over their head. I'm just saying that they should learn from it. Is really where I'm going with regard to the not to forget, but to learn and move forward. Rob?
I well remember the shock I received when a prominent doctor in Chicago told me of cases where pressure of the spinal fluid actually ruptured the brain. No wonder an alcoholic is strangely irrational. Who wouldn't be, would suffer such a fevered brain? Normal drinkers are not so affected, nor can they understand the aberrations of the alcoholic. Your man has probably been trying to conceal a number of scrapes, perhaps pretty messy ones. They may be disgusting. You may be at a loss to understand how such a seemingly above-board chap could be so involved. But these scrapes can generally be charged, no matter how bad, to the abnormal action of alcohol on his mind. When drinking or getting over a bout, an alcoholic is sometimes the model of honesty when normal, will do incredible things. Afterward, his revulsion will be terrible. Nearly always, these antics indicate nothing more than temporary conditions.
Sure. And the other thing is just to note, we have a broken brain is what they're trying to say. Problems are that, probably been trying to conceal a number of scrapes. We're all embarrassed by these things. In fact, immediately thereafter, we're pretty hard off of just feeling really bad about the situation, and in most cases are very apologetic, and also, as we've seen before, where they're, I'll never do this again, making promises that obviously is very, very hard, if not impossible to keep. But the idea here is that if somebody wasn't drinking, would they still be doing these things? And that's where you want to try to focus on the attempt to help this person understand alcoholism, and once they've understood it, understand why they're having the problems that they're having, and then just to go through the steps and try and support them through the program and get them to accept that and find their higher power. This next part is going to be some really good instructions for sponsoring, just so that just kind of noted, and keep a good eye out.
Yeah, we're at the top of page 141, everybody. This is not to say that all alcoholics are honest and upright or not drinking. Of course, that isn't so, and such people often may impose on you. Seeing your attempt to understand and help, some men will try to take advantage of your kindness. If you are sure your man does not want to stop, he may as well be discharged. The sooner, the better. You are not doing him a favor by keeping him on. Firing such an individual may prove a blessing to him. It may be just a jolt he needs. I know in my own particular case, nothing my company could have done would have stopped me for long. So long as I was able to hold my position, I could not possibly realize how serious my situation was. Had they fired me first, and had they then taken steps to see that I was presented with the solution contained in this book, I might have returned to them 6 months later, a well man.
Absolutely. So we're basically seeing here as an example of somebody that isn't necessarily doing the business any good, and because they're not doing the business any good, it's time to let them go and move on. And in some cases, that is absolutely the need and the reason why you would do something like this. But the example that you get here is, had they fired me first, and then had they taken steps to see that I was presented with the solution contained in this book, they might have been able to get this person back as a sober and well person 6 months later. That is certainly the case, and in some cases they need this jolt or this abrupt change in their life in order to wake them up and get them to seek the assistance of another alcoholic, and the assistance of finding their higher power and going through this program. Rob?
Yeah, this is a great section to deal with sponsees. There are people that come into the fellowship that are just trying to take advantage of a lot of kindness. They come in and they borrow money, time, and just, they get the money that they can from the group or from individuals, and then they move on to the next group. They're not interested in getting better. They're just there to use people. So you got to keep this in mind. Not everybody there is there to get help. A lot of people want to take advantage of kindness. So please keep that in mind. We have boundaries. Okay. That's why we have boundaries. So people don't take advantage of it. Because remember, if people take advantage of you, what happens? You get a resentment. And what happens when we get resentments? The malady returns and we drink again. So please keep that in mind. As I said, Leo said this right at the beginning. It says to employers, but this is also great for sponsees and sponsor relationships. So, what is good for the goose is good for the gander, as they say. But there are many men who want to stop, and with them you can go far. Your understanding treatment of their cases will pay dividends. Perhaps you have such a man in mind. He wants to quit drinking, and you want to help him, even if it be only a matter of good business. You now know more about alcoholism. You can see that he is mentally and physically sick. You are willing to overlook his past performances. Suppose an approach is made, something like this. Want me to keep going, Leo?
Yep, let's keep going.
Okay. Yep. State that you know about his drinking and that it must stop. You might say you appreciate his abilities, would like to keep him, but cannot if he continues to drink. A firm attitude at this point has helped many of us.
Yep. And so what we basically are doing is getting kind of the beginning of the establishment of expectations. And the expectation is that you want the person to stop drinking. The person has already said that they want to quit. We know a bit about alcoholism. The individual may or may not at that point know about it, but they're going to know because you're going to present the information to them. And then after they've learned, can go out and really work hard at finding their higher power and doing the work that's required. But this is a level setting at the beginning of a relationship between an employee and employer, a sponsee and a sponsor kind of deal. Rob?
Leo, this is a point I want to make is that the company has put down their foot and said that we're not going to put up with it anymore. They've not offered a solution. And this is what the problem is that, how many times do you think, or have we sat at home saying, I'm not drinking again, and all of a sudden we're baffled that we pick up another drink? It's one thing to put your foot down and come up with frothy emotional appeal. You're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose this. But no solution has been offered here yet. And this is the hard part is that, yeah, okay, well, I'm going to lose my job, but I don't know how to stop. This is the hard part right now. Next, he can be assured that you do not intend to lecture, moralize, or condemn, that if this was done formally, it was because of misunderstanding. If possible, express a lack of hard feeling toward him. At this point, it may be well to explain alcoholism, the illness. Say that you believe he is gravely ill person. With this qualification, being perhaps fatally ill, does he want to get well? You ask because many alcoholics, being warped and drugged, do not necessarily want to quit. But will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever?
Yeah, and this is really kind of taking that question, are you willing to go to any lengths in order to stop drinking? So basically, we're taking an employer that's sitting down with an employee, and I mean, we've said it probably 5 or 6 times already, but this is excellent for the sponsor-sponsee relationship. And then really, what we're seeing here is if there is an employer that's taken an employee under their wing and actually talking through all of this, they're at least representing themselves, even if they're not calling it that, as a temporary sponsor, and getting this person to start to ask some of those hard questions, with the reality that this is a fatal illness and can actually you can actually lose your life over drinking, and making the point that it's that serious, I think is important for everybody to understand and realize, because it is a serious illness and it's not one to be taken lightly. Rob?
Yeah, I like here it says, will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? It did not say one day at a time. It says to stop drinking forever. Nowhere in the book does it say one day at a time. If he says yes, does he really mean it? Or down inside, does he think he is fooling you? And that after rest and treatment, you will be able to get away with a few drinks now and then. We believe a man should be thoroughly probed on these points. Be satisfied he is not deceiving himself or you.
Yeah, deceiving. And really, that's the point we like to make with regard to honesty. And the honesty that we're talking about when it comes to the alcoholic is not the honest. We talk about being honest with others, but the real honesty comes with being honest with yourself. And that's kind of the point you want to make. Are you going to be honest with yourself in the fact that you really want to stop drinking? And that's it's a hard question to answer. Some people may say, well, it's easy to say that, but if you're sitting there thinking that you really want to quit, but immediately thereafter you're thinking, okay, I can get away with a drink or two here in the not too distant future with X, Y, and Z in place. I can get on the good side of people because I've shown them I can go a week or 2 weeks without drinking, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line is that if you're still thinking about that next drink, then you're not honestly wanting to quit completely. You have to dispel those thoughts with regard to drinking again, and honest internal decisions have to be made with regard to that. So when we talk about this, we're talking about real honesty, and it has to come from within. Rob?
The great obsession of every abnormal drinker is that one day they will be able to control and enjoy their drinking. They don't know how it's going to happen, but they still have that illusion that could happen. And this is the problem, is the big lie. You get a few weeks, a few months under your belt, and you think, have I been making too much of a big deal about this? I haven't had a drink in 3 months. Maybe I'm not an alcoholic. These thoughts start to creep into our mind. We have to smash the idea. Step one, smash the delusion that we're like other drinkers. We have an allergy. The allergy never goes away, the phenomenal craving. Anytime we take that first drink, we then set that cycle in motion where our body craves more. And until we smash that idea, we are going to continue the cycle all over again. So smash the idea, realize, take a look at our drinking history. Do I have this allergy? When I start drinking, can I control the amounts that I take? If the answer is no, we smash the illusion. Okay, deep down inside, I can never safely take a drink. But if we don't smash that illusion, If we think that, well, you know what, maybe I'm not a real alcoholic, we're going to drink again. Whether you mention this book is a matter for your discretion. If he temporizes and still thinks he can never drink again, even beer, he might as well be discharged after the next bender, which, if an alcoholic, he is almost certain to have. He should understand that emphatically. Either you are dealing with a man who can and will get well, or you are not. If not, why waste time with him? This may seem severe, but is usually the best course.
Yeah, we're talking black and white here. We're talking about a situation where you've had some good, honest communication with an individual, and they, in fact, are talking to you, telling you that they want to quit, but then their actions show that they really don't, because they continue to drink. Now, boy, we're working a fine line here, Rob. The idea here is that people that want to truly quit often actually relapse. Now, they are powerless over drinking, but at the same time, we also know that there are people that truly want to quit that actually do quit and can quit once they've found their higher power and dug into that inner strength that they haven't been able to tap into. So in this case, what we're talking about is an employee that is going out drinking, not showing up for work, not completing tasks, missing deadlines, constantly, causing problems and having to have other people pick up the slack and make up for the lost work that should have been at their desk. So you have to at certain points decide that it's not worth the business to keep this person on, and you let them go. Again, we're talking about some extreme cases here, and one where you actually do attempt to work with the individual, much like you would attempt to work with anybody that had a sickness or an illness. So that's all part of it. It's a judgment call, and it's a very hard one to make. There's no doubt about that. But there are people out there that quit and recover from alcoholism, and it happens every day. We have a new person that becomes that has got the ability to stop drinking. Every day we have people that relapse. So it's a never-ending problem, but there are people out there that are successful. People in this room are proof positive to that. Rob?
So true. If not, why waste time with them? When I think of a sponsor relationship, we're not wasting time. We have planted a seed. It told us that on page 96. We plant the seed. Okay, we let them know that it is an illness, that, if they do really want to quit drinking, that we are around. And until that time, there's other people that need our help, that we can be better serving those other people. But we've never wasted our time because we have planted the seed. They do understand that they are dealing with an illness. After satisfying yourself that your man wants to recover and that it will go to any extreme to do so, you may suggest a definite course of action. For most alcoholics who are drinking or who are just getting over a spree, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative. The matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred to your own doctor. Whatever the method, its object is to thoroughly clear mind and body of the effects of alcohol. In competent hands, this seldom takes long, nor is it very expensive. Your man will fare better if placed in such physical condition that he can think straight and no longer craves liquor. If you propose such a procedure to him, it may be necessary to advance the cost of treatment, but we believe it should be made plain that any expense will later be deducted from his pay. It is better for him to feel fully responsible.
Yeah, it's again just part of the times with regard to the fact that back then there wasn't insurance, and things just were, out of pocket expenses and that type of thing. Today we have insurance, and in most cases rehab is covered. In fact, I haven't seen yet where it hasn't been covered. So it shouldn't be that expensive to the individual and or to the employer. At least not up and above what is normally being paid out through insurance, et cetera. One other point is that, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative. Obviously, if somebody's going through withdrawal, you want that to be monitored by professionals and not just done out of just going through it, because it can be quite dangerous and serious to go through withdrawals. But we've talked about that before as well. But here we go. We've got somebody that really wants to quit. They're at that point where they've dried out and they're sober. They're ready, willing, and able to accept the new program, and that's what we're certainly going to try and attempt here. Rob?
Yeah, I love the fact in this is that hospitalization for the jittery and befogged is what we read on page XXVI, so that their brain can clear a little bit to get the alcohol out of the alcoholic. Leo, what you had said makes, is so important that today, things are a lot different than they were in 1939 when the book was published. We have a lot more treatment center, detox centers. If the alcoholic tries to wean himself off the alcohol by himself, he could go into delirium tremens. He could have a seizure and die. We certainly don't want that on our conscience. And, that is a terrible way to die. So we make sure they get the help to go to a detox. It's difficult at times getting into a detox. I know in Toronto, there's, lineup sometimes waiting, and you got to wait time. And treatment centers are not cheap. They talk about here that they're not that expensive, but they are, the good ones. Well, I don't know how good they are, but they charge a lot of money. So if your company will pay for it, hats off to you. If your man accepts your offer, it should be pointed out that physical treatment is but a small part of the picture. If you are providing him with the best possible medical attention, he should understand that he must undergo a change of heart. To get over drinking will require transformation of thought and attitude. We all had to place recovery above everything. For without recovery, we would have lost both home and business.
And family and friends, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea here is this change of heart is also just another way of saying a spiritual experience. To get over drinking will require transformation, and that is through finding your higher power and changing your life altogether. And we're not just talking about for drinking. Remember that this program is something that you're going to use to change and transform your life in all facets and all areas, to actually support and reinforce that recovery. And it should be put above everything else, because obviously the recovery is what's going to facilitate your ability to do the other things that you're not able to do when you're drinking. So the idea here is that you put recovery above everything else. And, it takes time. You have to explain it to your employer. Your employer should know what's going on and should support that. Your home, being the family, they should also know what you're doing and also support it. And your friends, true friends, will say, the ones that are not going to give you a hard time for not drinking anymore, should also be there to understand that you've got to do this first and foremost before anything else actually can happen. Rob?
Yeah. Dr. Young was trying to get Roland Hazard to have a vital spiritual change. Dr. Silkworth was trying to do moral psychology, which is changing our thinking. It is so important for us alcoholics to change the way we think. In the fact that we were selfish and self-centered. We only thought of ourselves. So now we have to change our thinking so that we are more spiritual. What the spiritual brings to us is the fact that we're thinking about other people before ourselves. We put others' needs in front of ours. What can I do for you today instead of what can I get from you today? And that's what they're talking about here, is to get over drinking will require transformation of thought and attitude. We have to change the way we think. Material well-being always follows spiritual progress. Page 127, we've read about that. So if we put material well-being before we put spiritual, we will lose it. Can you have every confidence in his ability to recover? On the subject of confidence, can you adopt the attitude that so far as you are concerned, this will be a strictly personal matter. That his alcoholic dereliction, the treatment about to be undertaken, will never be discussed without his consent. It might be well to have a long chat with him on his return.
Yeah, this is just a real quick message for the anonymity and being private in regards to this, because there are some prejudices out there with regard to drinking, and the thoughts and ideas can be damaging and can derail recovery if not treated appropriately. So basically, the thought here is the anonymity should be respected to the highest degree. Rob?
To return to the subject matter of this book, it contains full suggestions by which the employee may solve his problem. To you, some of the ideas which it contains are novel. Perhaps you are not quite in sympathy with the approach we suggest. By no means do we offer it as the last word on this subject, but so far as we are concerned, it has worked with us. After all, are you not looking for results rather than methods? Whether your employee likes it or not, he will learn the grim truth about alcoholism. That won't hurt him a bit, even though he does not go for this remedy.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a difficult thing to accept and a difficult thing to work through for obvious reasons. If it was easy, we wouldn't have AA. The idea here is that the person should learn something about alcoholism. There's some hard truths that are apparent, and should accept that, and we're looking for results. And this is a little bit different. The employer, is looking for somebody that's going to show up on time, that's going to complete the tasks that they've been given. They're going to do it and they're going to meet their deadlines, and they're going to satisfy the needs of the customers and bring the value that is required to actually make this company or that company that they're working for profitable. So it is a very results-driven type of approach to it, which can be and is slightly different than what a family might be expecting in regards to that, even though there's a different kind of value that the person brings to the family. It's still, in this case, we're talking about financial results, and that is twofold. Whether it's the value to the customer and keeping the customer, because it obviously costs money to go out and find new customers. You want to once you've got a customer, you want to keep them, and you want this person to bring that kind of value to the table and be able to be profitable for the company. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, you said something that was interesting in the fact that you want your employee to show up on time and sober.
Right, and sober. Exactly.
I just thought I'd throw that in. But this is what worked for the first 100 people. This program worked for the first 100 people. So we know that it works. If there's something you have that works for you or something different, AA says we have no monopoly on it. If it works for you, great. Okay, but this is what worked for the first 100 people and thousands of people afterwards. So please keep that in mind. Leo, it is 12:54. Would you like to bring Mr. Bill into it?
I absolutely would. Thank you
Excellent.
for bringing that up.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. All right, thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Good job today. Like you guys pointed out, this is good instructions for a sponsor. This chapter was written by Hank Parkhurst. It was the only chapter that Bill Wilson didn't write. His hand was in it somewhere in the beginning. He wrote the first paragraph or whatever, and he probably edited a lot of it. And basically what Hank is doing here, he's telling us how to deal with an alcoholic when you're the employer. And you can use that same information for being a sponsor. Anybody dealing with an alcoholic basically has to use the same tactics or the same techniques, whether you're the employer, whether you're the sponsor, whether you're a family member, whatever. You still have to deal with an alcoholic the same. So most people think that this chapter has a lot of instruction in it for sponsors and for what we're supposed to do when we're dealing with another alcoholic that's trying to get sober. And he told us in here that he talked about that guy Clarence Snyder. It says if he has your willpower and guts, he'll make the grade. Willpower and guts don't work for us. That's from people from the outside, people that are not alcoholics. They think everything is a matter of willpower and guts, and that's all it takes to get sober. Willpower does not work when you have some sort of a body chemistry thing going on. If you think willpower works, get a bag of onions and try chopping them up and use your willpower not to have your eyes water. Willpower doesn't work for something that involves your body chemistry. So most people think it's willpower, but willpower has nothing whatsoever to do with it. When he talked in here about us having a broken brain, I get a kick out of that. That was on page 140. Yeah, I remember the shock when I received when a prominent doctor in Chicago told me of cases where pressure of spinal fluid actually ruptured the brain. This doctor that he's talking about, his name was Dr. Bowles, and he was in Chicago. And this guy actually treated Hank Parkhurst for his alcoholism. And what he did a spinal tap on Hank that was supposed to relieve pressure from his brain, and then he would be able to drink normally after that. This is the kind of quackery that was going on back in the 1930s or so. People trying to use all kinds of crazy treatments. And obviously it didn't work because Hank wound up drunk again, and then he wound up in the town's hospital, and Bill had to get him out of there and help him get sober. But there's all kinds of different things. So this is not something that he just made up. Hank actually went through this process with this doctor, and he had a spinal tap done to remove the spinal pressure from his brain, because this doctor had some kind of theory that would cure a person from alcoholism and they would be able to drink normally again. So there's a whole lot of crazy stuff that went on in the beginning of AA, and that's one of them. But again, this chapter is about how to deal with an alcoholic, and you can really use this for instructions for sponsoring people, because there's no real instructions for sponsors in this book, because they didn't have sponsors when the book came out. But this chapter can be used on how to deal with somebody who's trying to get sober, whether they're an employee or responsee, whatever. This chapter can help you. And again, it was written by Hank Parkhurst. He was the second guy in New York to get sober. Bill found him in the autumn of over in Towns Hospital. That's where he was, because Hank wound up in Towns Hospital quite a few times. And Bill is the guy who picked him up there, because Bill used to go back there looking for people, trying to get them. It was somewhere in the autumn of 1935. That's where Bill found him, in the Towns Hospital, and Bill talked to him and helped him get sober. So, of course, Dr. Silkworth helped him get sober also. And he wrote this, and without Hank, this book probably never would have gotten written. Like Rob pointed out, Hank was the pusher. He was the guy that kept telling Bill Wilson, you got to get this book done. You got to get it done. You got to write another chapter. We don't have enough. Keep doing it. Keep writing more stuff. Bill would have wrote half of this book and stuck it in the closet and, sat on it. But Hank was the pusher. Come on, get it done. Without Hank, this book would have never got done. So we really owe Hank a debt of gratitude. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Bill.
You bet. Thank you, Bill. All right, Rob, let's go ahead and close with the Serenity Prayer.
Okay. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
All right.